Welcome to another episode of the Marvel Masterworks podcast. As always, I'm your host, Adam, and with me is my co-host, Donnie. Donnie, how's it going?
Hey, what's up, Marvel fans? It's the man whose ring runs on fanboy energy, the podcasting machine, the big nerd in green, here to talk to you about my favorite Marvel character, Venom.
Indeed, as Donnie alluded to, very upfront, we are discussing Venom today. A discussion on Venom, it was going to be a long time coming. We talked about, eventually doing a deep dive into kind of like the most influential stories of Venom, kind of like we've done over at the Green Lantern podcast, where we've spotlighted all the lanterns to a degree. We had talked about that, doing that for Venom, because Donnie is such a big Venom fan. But then we got the wonderful announcement that, two announcements. One, that the current run of the series was coming to an end with issue 35, aka issue 200, which is the issue we're going to review today. And also that a new series starting from a brand new number one, as Marvel is wanting to do as of recently, starting in November, there's going to be a new Venom number one, and we're going to start reviewing that on a regular basis when that number one hits. So there's going to be a lot more Venom discussion. But today we're going to focus on issue 200,
Yes.
Or 35, depending on which way you like to look at your numbering. I like the bigger number, the nostalgic,
Right.
historical number. So that's the one I'm going to go with, whether Marvel likes it or not. That's what I'm going to do, because it's my show and our show, and we'll do what we want here. So there.
That's right. Yeah, you tell them.
Yeah, I'm showing resistance against the corporation, even though I paid money for their book. Anyway, I digress. But in addition to more Venom, when discussing Venom, you have to discuss also Spider-Man, because they are intrinsically tied to each other historically, and we are also going to be doing regularly Spider-Man. We're going to be covering regularly Spider-Man books as well. We're going to start, kind of semi-regular coverage. We'll kick off with the Sinister War event that's going to be arriving shortly. I think it's by the end of the month. I think is the first issue. I could be wrong on that, but either the end of the month or beginning of August. But our regular ongoing coverage of the Spider-Man books will start in earnest post Sinister War, because the books are going in a new direction. So Nick Spencer is currently writing the.
Wait a minute, in earnest, you say? So we're not allowed to laugh and make jokes,
Well, no, we can still make jokes. I just thought that seemed kind of appropriate. I guess I was wrong. I'm trying to sound smarter, Donnie. The glasses aren't doing it, so I got to come up with something else. I got to dig deep into vocabulary. More regularly. Let's put it that way.
Gotcha.
But after Nick Spencer's run ends, I believe with issue 75.
Right.
There is going to be a status quo in the shift in the Spider-Man universe. It is going to the sort of overall title for this new Spider-Man initiative is titled Spider-Man Beyond. So it's essentially the main gist of what's happening is that Peter Parker's clone, Ben Reilly,
Yes.
is
Return
coming
to
back.
Ben Reilly. Yes.
Yeah, who was created and made famous in the 90s. He's coming back, and according to the press release, he's coming back to reclaim the Spider-Man mantle. So the big status quo change actually kicks off in September. So my mistake. Issue 75 is the kickoff of this new.
Right. And this is shipping thrice monthly, right? Is that what the article said? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And thrice monthly, which means 3 times a month, which means goodbye to the happiness of my wallet.
But thrice sounds so good. It sounds so eloquent.
It does, but then you look at your wallet and it's like, wait a minute.
Well, yeah. You
can drink. They're using that word very fancily to kind of distract the target.
Yeah, you can tell. You can tell people at parties. The ones you're going to stay safe now. Make sure you're staying safe. But say, I buy a book thrice monthly.
Yeah, you can sound very intelligent while you do it.
There you go.
But no, I'll be buying it as with my Spider-Man collecting. It's via Comixology, so at least space-wise, it won't be taking up much space, which is good.
Right.
But
digital helps, obviously. Again, when you're looking at a room like this, when you're trying to find space for everything, digital is
basically my rule is if you ship twice or 3 times a month, you are on my digital list. Okay. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It just has to be that way. So the article mentions that this is the first time since Brand New Day era that Spider-Man is returning to a 3 times a month shipping rotation. And because it's shipping 3 times a month, it won't just be one writer and one artist doing it. There's going to be a rotating creative team to do the book, by the sounds of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that includes writers Zeb Wells, Kelly Thompson, Saladin Ahmed, and Cody Ziegler, not related to Dolph Ziggler, at least I don't think so.
And I'm just happy that you had to do the names this time for once.
Yeah. And according to the article, it appears that Amazing Spider-Man artist Patrick Gleason, or Geeson, or it's Gleason, isn't it?
It's Gleason, yes.
Okay, so this article made a mistake. So yeah, I thought so. Patrick Gleason will be both writing and drawing some upcoming issues of the series.
Well, that bodes well.
Yeah, he's great because he's done work on Green Lantern and Superman, so we're very familiar with him.
Yes.
Basically, as it is, they're talking about that Ben Reilly's return comes at a particular low point in Peter Parker's life. Following the conclusion of Nick Spencer's Amazing Spider-Man run, which hasn't happened yet, Peter will be grappling with his failure as a hero, apparently to the point that he's willing to cede the mantle back to his clone. Ben's mission is to prove himself the greatest Spider-Man of them all, and he's even got the backing of the mysterious Beyond Corporation and a redesigned costume. Because, of course, anytime somebody new takes up the suit, there's a redesigned costume.
Right. Which means Titan Collectibles.
Exactly. Which means Donnie's probably going to spend more money. So, Donnie, I wasn't really, there's a lot of, talk about there's a lot of talk about, how the storyline came, how the change came about, and basically that the main concept was sort of brought forward by Zeb Wells, and then I think it's Kelly Thompson and I'm going to mispronounce this. Saladin Ahmed were there, brought on board to help flesh it out. But I wasn't reading much in the 90s. I had one issue of Superman at the time, a bunch of Zorro issues because I was collecting that.
Well, you're pretty young in the 90s, right?
I would have been, let's see, I would have been 7, 8.
Yeah.
I mean, depending on when in the 90s, but yeah, 7 through 10, I would have been in that age range. So you, I'm sure, have probably read more about Ben Reilly than I have, even though I've read some of him in retrospect.
Right.
But what is your take on him returning and taking up the mantle of Spider-Man? Are you excited about this?
Oh, very much so. I've always wanted to see, Ben return. I really liked the character in the 90s. I know a lot of people, the Clone Saga was a mess. There were a lot of changes in editorial and writing, but I still thought the character had potential. And I remember, it's been a while since I've read that, but I enjoyed that greatly. The 90s was a time for me when I had, graduated high school, gone out, got a few jobs in college, and finally had some money to go to the comic shop and buy a bunch of crossovers and numerous issues. And I found that era very enjoyable. So
now, Donnie, is there a way, maybe before this story kicks off, like, is there a way that we could relatively easily, without getting overtly complicated, cover the Clone Saga?
I could think it over. I think we can cover the Clone Saga.
Is there a trade that I can get that doesn't involve 45,000 tie-in issues and like that's what I'm saying?
We could probably come up with something, but it's complicated. Let's just put it that way.
Oh, no, I understand that the story would be complicated. Well, I'm just saying, is there an easily digestible collection that we could get our hands on and read this and review it as a kind of primer before?
Yeah, I mean, there are trades, there are collected editions, but it was such a big kind of sprawling story. I don't think you could get just one like trade or hardcover or whatever and understand everything that was going on. So
okay, well, we'll look into which trades are available. And
yeah, I'm always down for that though. Yeah,
because I think that'd be cool. Because I'll confess I haven't really read the original Clone Saga. But if there's and again, I don't mean not complicated, because anytime you're dealing with clones,
right,
it's complicated. Speaking of, I wish I had a clone of my own, or a couple of clones, so that I can go traverse the omniverse with all my different, omniverse wives, and the clones can do, the crap that I got to take care of here, and I don't have to worry about it.
Well, there you go. Although if it plays out like it did in Multiplicity, that could be problems,
Starring, of course, everybody's favorite Batman, or at least mine. I don't care what everybody else thinks. Michael Keaton. But anyway, so yeah, I'd like to kind of look into that, because I've never read the original. Like, I know who Ben Reilly. I have the very, the basic info about it, but I'd like to kind of read that as a primer, and maybe we could talk about it. I think it'd be kind of cool.
Yeah.
But I am reading the Miles Morales version of the Clone, like his take on the Clone Saga, which is pretty interesting so far. And the article, just to wrap up this news bit, the article does go on to say that following his own Clone Wars, Miles Morales is getting a new costume too. Donnie, are you shocked by this?
I am so shocked I had to pick myself up off the floor.
Yeah, and so again, I'm just knowing the basics of Ben Reilly and his function. I'm excited by this. I've always wanted to kind of check out the Clone Saga, but a lot of times when I go back and do a deep dive, I need that push, like that purpose of, okay, give me a reason to go back and do this read through. And Marvel is not giving me the reason that I needed. They're giving me the extra push that I needed. Just like, conversely, I've always wanted to check out Moon Knight, but then you go search Moon Knight and realize there's about, I'm exaggerating here, but 45 volumes of Moon Knight. It's like, where do I start?
Yeah.
Thankfully, Marvel said, you know what, here, we'll give you a new #1. And so I'm going to start Moon Knight with #1.
Right.
But so So I'm looking forward to learning more about the character and having him do a run as Spider-Man. And listen, I gotta be honest. The Spider-Man Beyond, like moniker, the tagline, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
reminds me of Batman Beyond. That's never a bad thing. So I'm on board.
Sure.
So I'm excited. It'll be fresh for me, both going back and the new stuff. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Spider-Man is in terms of Marvel characters, he's in my top 5. So.
Oh, good choice. Sure.
I can't go wrong with reading some extra Spider-Man for sure. So we'll be covering that, of course, and we hope that the actual stories match our current excitement levels. So yeah, we'll keep tabs on that, and as our reviews come, we will we'll bring them to you both here on YouTube and where else, Donnie?
You can also find us on iTunes and Podbean. That is the Multiverse Musings Vidcast and the Multiverse Musings podcast on iTunes and Podbean.
All right, perfect. So, Donnie, let's get to the that was a great shameless plug, Donnie.
But you said perfect. You said perfect, so I had to say.
Oh, yes, indeed. Yeah, I mean, if you actually had gum, that'd be dangerous because you could get it stuck on.
There's no way I'm spitting gum in this room. No way.
That would be very dangerous. So I wouldn't
Absolutely not.
But let's get down to the main issue we're going to talk about today, which is Venom 35, better known and it should be known as Venom number 200.
Number 200, yes. So just very quickly here, we're going to eventually cover Venom's origin on another vidcast, but I just want to say, I actually bought Amazing Spider-Man 300 from a spinner rack in 7-Eleven in 1988, and that was the issue. Coming in contact with this character, that was the one that made me a comic book reader for life, because I had previously been a comic book reader from a very young age, but as a teenager, I was wondering at some point, am I going to outgrow this? Is this going to be something that kind of goes in the dustbin of my life?
Clearly, the answer was no.
Clearly, the answer is no. Resounding no. Amazing Spider-Man 300 hit me in a way that just made me want to see more of Venom. And, of course, the character blew up in the 90s, and I was there for the ride. So seeing the Venom renaissance, both with the movies and the comic success here, that just warms my heart, because it is very nostalgic for me, thinking back to the early 90s and the mid 90s and watching Venom's success. So I was very happy when Adam said, let's review this. I was all in.
Yeah, I guess maybe I should give a brief background on my history with Venom.
Sure, go ahead.
It's very simple. I saw him in the animated series, the one from the 90s. And I'm like, that is one cool looking SOB.
Voiced by Hank Azaria.
Yeah, who was formerly, Apu. And the other guy, wasn't he the gardener, the groundskeeper Willie?
He's done numerous voices on The Simpsons, as well as the show Brockmire, which is not a kid show, by the way.
Yeah. So I knew him from that, and I instantly was like fascinated, especially how they did the character in that show. By the way, for my money, that's one of the best Spider-Man interpretations I've ever seen, is the 90s animated Spider-Man show.
Oh, yes.
Also one of Marvel's best animated efforts, along with the X-Men show in the 90s. And that's not 90s nostalgia, it's just fact. So I was taken by the character right away. Again, my reading renaissance kind of happened in let me look at my comic on the wall. 03. Okay. There were sort of like 3 quintessential comics that I picked up and that I kept up via trade. Well, I started with trades, as everybody mostly knows. So there were 3. There were 2 that were DC and one was Marvel. So it was Dark Knight Returns, was one. Then I got the Kingdom Come. And the third one, the Marvel one, was Ultimate Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
And I read that one through, and they got to there was a version of Venom that they did, which I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed their twist on it. And then also, I was excited when it was announced that Venom was going to be introduced in live action via Spider-Man 3. And then I saw Spider-Man 3, and
you're like, where's the actual Venom?
this is not what I wanted. But again,
not what anybody wanted.
But again, like I said, so my reading sort of history is not as large as yours. I've read I've read this current series most continuously. I'm still trying to make my way through the King in Black fully, because that's a big. I mean, it's a massive story. But I think this iteration of the title with Ryan Stegman, I believe, is the
Stegman and Cates. Yes.
Yeah. Stegman is the artist, correct?
Mm-hmm. And Donnie Cates. Yes.
Donnie Cates is the writer.
Yes.
I think it's been a great run. So yeah, I can see why everybody is fascinated by this character and why he's been so popular over time.
You know, he has developed in many unexpected ways over the years. He's a very complex character, more so than you would think, because, you know, when he showed up, he was just basically a strong villainous version of Spider-Man. Yeah. But, you know, sometimes you catch lightning in a bottle, and that's what happened with Marvel. Is a few developments happened and people were drawn to Eddie. They were drawn to Venom because he had some things happen in his history, and you know, you kind of sympathize with him. And that's what I did, is that I started to see him as somebody who didn't necessarily set out to be a villain, didn't want to be a villain, and kind of grappled with his own morality.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's definitely evident in the character, at least in the avenues that I've read him in. So yeah, I agree with that completely. Yeah. So yeah, let's with that on the way, let's get into the meat of the issue.
All right, Venom number 200. How many variant covers were printed for this?
Oh, ridiculous amount.
It was like 10 or 12?
Yeah.
Anyway, this is the one I got. I like this one.
Oh yeah, that's
oh yeah, beautiful. All these little Venoms on here. I like it. Anyway, so it opens up kind of with a brief recap. You get a couple of pages that goes over Eddie's rivalry with Spider-Man, the King in Black storyline, including Eddie's death, his rebirth, his defeat of Null, and becoming godlike, accessing the Clintar hive mind, and of course being a father to Dylan. So in case this is your jumping on point for whatever reason, you hadn't read Venom before, or you haven't been able to read Venom recently, it kind of catches you up very quickly as to where we are. So what did you think of the initial?
I thought that was well done.
Yeah.
I think whenever you hit a milestone, no, it doesn't have to necessarily be the ending of a run. But I think whenever you're starting a fresh creative team, or let's say you've just done a big run on the title, and you're gearing up for another event storyline with a character or a title, I think it's smart to do a kind of recap for like 2 or 3 pages.
Definitely, I would definitely agree.
Just because I think, I like to. I can't remember who said it, but this has been said by somebody, and maybe you'll know, Donnie. But I remember reading someone's take that everybody's, you don't know which issue is going to be somebody's first comic.
Exactly.
Right? So.
Right.
And I think new creative teams, new story arcs afford you that opportunity to do. Here's a quick catch up for anybody who hasn't been reading.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it doesn't have to take up your whole issue. It can literally be 2 or 3 pages.
Sure. And it's just like you say, every issue may be someone's first issue. Whether it's somebody returning or, which would be their first issue, but somebody coming back to the character, or somebody for whom the first time, let's say it's a 7-year-old who, like you say, saw an animated series, or a 12-year-old who went out and saw the movie, wants to jump in with Venom, doesn't have all the information on the character's comic history, but you want to catch him up so they can enjoy this series. Well, that's a good way to do it.
I mean, that I know I wasn't a kid. I was probably 19, 20 when the first Spider-Man movie came out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was 19, yes. And I love that movie. And I thought, I want to check out some Spider-Man comics. And I wouldn't have known where to start with Spider-Man. Like, had I jumped into to whatever number it was at the time in 02, I would have been lost, dazed, and confused.
Oh, yeah.
What?
Yeah.
and then my comic shop guy said, "Oh, you wanna try Spider-Man?" And I knew, obviously, I'm not an idiot. I don't live in well, some people will tell you I'm an idiot, but I'm not totally devoid of general knowledge. I knew who Spider-Man was before the movie, folks, obviously.
Yeah.
But like, what was going on in the comics, I had no freaking clue. So my comic book shop owner said, "Why don't you start with Volume 1? The trade of Ultimate Spider-Man. It's a new, modern day." The way you explained to me, a modern day updated on the continuity. Basically, you're starting from scratch. I'm like, all right, cool, and that's how I got started. I would have never been able to jump in on issue, 600, 700, whatever the heck Amazing Spider-Man was on at the time.
Mm-hmm.
That would have felt so daunting. So
yeah, and that's why people don't jump into comics sometimes, because they feel like they've missed so much that they can't enjoy the story. So.
Yeah. So I think this issue, in those few pages, if you've never read a Venom story, but all you know is that I saw him in the Venom movie, and I'm excited and I want to read more about this character. You've got the basics. You've got the 411 based on this montage of pages.
Right. So in the issue Back on Earth, we see that Eddie has been severely aged.
Yeah, I was even curious. I'm like, wait a minute, why is he so old?
By recent events, and he also struggles to be a dad to a moody child. He's got help, however, from the symbiote, who is
kids
operating.
Are moody? No, I thought they were all well behaved, calm.
Absolutely, all the time. So yeah, all I have to say is my beard used to all be one color. Then I became a dad. Anyway, so. But very proud of my kids, by the way. Anyway, back to the issue. He's got help from the symbiote, who takes the form of a dog and actually walks Dylan to school, which I thought was very creative. We also got a funny cameo of Sleeper, who takes the form of a cat and very much acts like a cat when he says, "Oh, by the way, Spider-Man called." And Eddie was like, "Why didn't you tell me?" And Sleeper's like, "I don't work here." So I'm like, yeah, if a cat could talk, that's probably what it would say.
It's funny that when I saw the aged Eddie, I said, well, I know what aged him. It's not this King in Black nonsense, craziness.
Yeah.
He basically watched the 7-game series between the Leafs and Montreal and aged 3 decades like I did. Right. Thanks a lot, boys. But anyway, that was awkward because I'm like, last time how far behind am I on this King in Black storyline? Because the last time I saw him, he was blonde. What happened?
Right, yeah. Well, again, dying and coming back to life and being in charge of an entire alien race, it'll take it out of you.
Yeah,
so.
It'll cut some gray in your hair. But I mean, the talking, I like that the symbiote can take alternate forms, and I like that it's taken, the dog. It's
Yeah.
kind of cool.
Yeah. I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah. The art on that is fantastic. Like, that looks like one menacing dog.
Oh, yeah, very much so. Well, especially later on when it gets, gigantic.
Like,
There
you
was a
don't
point
want
where
you don't want to attempt to pet that thing.
no. However, we get a very touching moment as the symbiote walks Dylan to school. Dylan asks the symbiote, what's your name? And the symbiote doesn't really give it an answer, but it kind of connects with Dylan mind to mind and says, this is who I am. And Dylan starts to cry. So we see this very real bond that has started to form between the two of them.
Yeah.
And I really liked that part of the story.
Yeah, I did too. I thought it was
Very
look,
emotional.
I still don't understand what its name is, or how that all works. But that was emotional. Like, without telling me anything, it was a very emotional scene. I liked it. Yeah.
Right. Well, again, it may be, the kind of name that you can't really wrap your tongue around if you're human. And that's, I think it was meant to leave it up to your imagination, that it's something that was actually kind of very old to the symbiote, that he really hadn't thought about himself or herself, whatever it is, in terms of just being on its own for so long.
Yeah.
And sharing that with Dylan was, it's kind of a secret part of itself that is shared with Dylan. So
yeah.
So the scene changes to Eddie having lunch with Spider-Man, who just had to be in this issue, by the way.
Of course, yeah.
And we see that Peter's actually feeling guilty for all of the destruction that the symbiote race has brought upon Earth. And, the symbiote's history has been, retconned numerous times. And we see another tweak to that here. We see that Eddie tells Spider-Man, "Oh, by the way, the symbiotes were here before you brought this symbiote here."
Yeah.
And and of course, Peter had been feeling extremely guilty, and he's like, "Yeah. So if you ever want to go back to being a supervillain, I'd love to, the inference is I'd love to punch you a little bit." And Eddie'd be like, "Right now, no, you wouldn't." Because I could just kind of snap you out of existence if I wanted to.
They've altered the history a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I like that they've kept that aspect of it intact.
Right.
I mean, just because it's older and been here longer doesn't mean you can't have the situation of Peter bringing a piece of it.
Right, he brought that one here, but Eddie was alleviating his guilt, saying there were other symbiotes here long before this one. So it would have happened. It was inevitable. It would have happened eventually. So you don't need to feel guilty about it. So, and I really like the scene, where the guys try to rob the place, and they burst in and with the gun or whatever, and Peter just turns around and looks at him, and they're like, "You got to be kidding me! I'm going to rob the place with Spider-Man in it."
I also like the part where Spider-Man tries to distract him to steal his fry.
Yeah.
And he slaps his hand away.
Right, yeah.
And then we see that moment again pay off when it's weird because Eddie can kind of be in multiple places at once.
Yes.
At least telepathically.
Mm-hmm.
So at the same time as he's having lunch with Spider-Man, he's also having a meeting with the Avengers.
Yeah.
And Iron Man is trying to talk to him about, Null and the whole mess. And, he's in sort of like a trance kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, "Oh, sorry, Tony. Peter was just trying to steal one of my fries." So they have that. That moment pays itself off later. Like they have the reverse.
Yeah.
Which I
like. Yeah, you see the other side of that.
Which I thought was really funny.
Yeah, what you're talking about, Eddie now has this godlike power. He is borderline, if not completely omnipresent. So he's speaking with the Avengers, he's speaking with the X-Men, he's speaking with the Guardians of the Galaxy, he's speaking with the Silver Surfer all at once. And the message is that the Maker is coming back. That version of Franklin Richards. So, I really like that we see in this issue if I can point out some character development,
Yeah.
that a fully reformed Eddie, who, again, Eddie started out as a villain. He did kill some people. He wasn't, he was very dangerous at one time, but we see someone who has not only been reformed, but who is now at peace with himself. Because that's one of the things that I thought was so interesting about Venom in the initial stages of his development is that he hated himself. He blamed himself for his mother's death. He was alienated from his father. He was a terrible husband, and he hated himself a lot. And he turned that anger out on Peter Parker. It was displaced anger of saying, if this external tormentor, if I can just rid my life of Spider-Man, everything will be okay. When it was really his own issues with which he hadn't dealt. But now we see somebody who is at peace with himself, so much to the point to where he's offered membership in the Avengers.
Yeah, that's interesting because he turns it down because he says he can't be, present, the way he would need to be if he was going to be an Avenger. But he recommends somebody else to Captain America because he said you're going to need the extra help, and I know a guy. And he doesn't flat out say who it is.
By the way, I said Franklin Richards. I meant Reed Richards, the Ultimate Reed Richards. That's who the maker is. I just replayed that in my head anyway.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's good. But so he doesn't say the name of who he recommends, but the page then, the scene then shifts to Flash Thompson, aka
Anti-Venom.
Anti-Venom.
Agent Anti-Venom. Yes.
Yeah. Who I really like. I like the design. I like the character. I dig it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, well, you see, he is some cafe or something. I forget exactly where they said he was, but he's, I guess, buying some food or whatever, and he's confronted by some of the guardsmen who are hunting symbiotes, some of whom have bonded with humans after this big conflict with Null, humans who are in need of them for, like, their healing abilities. And so we see that's actually what they were after, and they just so happened to find, hey, there's Flash Thompson. And we see that, it was believed by a lot of the world that Flash Thompson was dead. Now we see that he wasn't, and there was a picture taken of him, so the world will soon know that he is not dead. So I'm assuming here that means that they're going to find a place for him in the Avengers.
Yeah, or because I think I know it seems like Marvel is really going to expand and key in on the world of the symbiote and the symbiote characters. So I definitely feel we're going to see a lot more of Anti-Venom or Agent Anti-Venom.
Yeah. But I want to make one more point. When Eddie was having this omnipresent power, it reminded me a lot of when Kyle Rayner had the ion power back in Volume 3 of Green Lantern. And, he did the same thing. He was multiple places at once. Yeah. And if you want to know more about Kyle Rayner or any of the Green Lanterns, you can join us on the Emerald Echo podcast on iTunes and Podbean, as well as the Emerald Echo vidcast right here on YouTube.
The 2 for 2 with those plugs here, yeah.
Shameless plug. Yeah.
No, so I'm looking forward to seeing. I really like that. It seems like I said, there's going to be more emphasis put on the characters that are inhabiting or sharing a life with a symbiote. So I dig that.
Yes.
And there's an interesting, now that we mentioned Flash Thompson, there's an interesting parallel and role reversal. When you look at Eddie's son Dylan, because we get quite a few scenes of him at high school, and he's being picked on and bullied.
That's a good point, yeah.
That kind of ties him to Peter Parker in the sense that Peter Parker was also picked on.
The object of Flash's bullying
in high school,
yes.
Yeah. And then it ties in with that Anti-Venom Flash Thompson, because Flash Thompson was the bully in the Peter Parker story. So there's a lot of parallels, the tie-ins in that one scene. If you know enough about the characters, the different characters, you'll pick up on it. And I thought that's a nice touch.
Excellent point, sir.
Yeah.
So back at Midtown, we see that Dylan's getting bullied. He gets sent to the principal, who's like, why are you in so many skirmishes? And he's like, I've been fighting my whole life. And on the way home, again, he's being accompanied by the symbiote in the form of a dog. He runs afoul of Jack-o'-lantern, and Dylan is injured, and the symbiote bonds to him to save his life.
Yeah.
And, it's funny because the issue closes with a conversation between Eddie and Dylan, who is now the new Venom. And Eddie suggests that he knew it was going to happen all along. He's like, that didn't take long.
Yeah.
Which I thought was very interesting.
I did, because, I think in order to save Dylan's life, the symbiote had to bond with him in a way that was, lasting and not.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something you can just, it's not like the healing factor of like a mutant or Superman where, you just briefly you touch him or something,
right?
And the wound, it has to literally become one with him and envelope him in a way to sort of heal the wound. So he definitely has to bond. There has to be a bonding process there.
Right.
And I like how Dylan changes the costume.
Yes, kind of reminds me of, you remember Pitt from Image? Remember Pitt and Timmy with the big change. Yeah.
But also, I think it's a nod to Todd McFarlane, and because Spawn has chains on his outfit. And,
I'd say that too. Sure.
And Dylan says, well, because Eddie asked him why the chains. He's like, all the cool comic books I read, the characters have chains.
Yeah.
And I thought of Spawn, and also the bully that bullies Dylan. The last name is McFarlane, so. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's the way Todd wanted to be remembered as the book, but I don't think there's any malice intended there.
No, definitely not. So, yeah, and I like that, Dylan says, is it okay to, call myself Venom because you're Venom?
Yeah.
And Eddie says, no, we are the Flash. I mean,
oh, God.
I had to throw that in.
You know what's funny though? I'm reading that line, and it says we are Venom, and I get it. He says it in the movie, but that we are, see the phrase now we are has not been tainted. Because of the Flash TV show and Candace Patton's Iris West. Every time I hear it, I think of that stupid line, and I get angry. And
well, I get it. Just to understand though, Eddie was saying that long before the Flash TV show. It's always we.
Yeah.
So
The beautiful thing about it is that with Venom, it makes sense.
Yes.
With Iris West, listen, lady, you can say whatever you want. You ain't the Flash. You just having coitus with the Flash. That's all. There's a difference. Get it straight, lady. And that's all I'm going to rant on that topic.
Okay. Well, yeah. Let's. Poor Iris. Anyway, but I just. So I really liked this issue. I can't say enough about it because it kind of encapsulated so many different things that have been appealing about Venom over the years, and it brought together a lot of kind of old storylines and gave homages to them, wrapped things up nicely. So I'm just a huge fan of this issue. So
I really like this issue because it. And when I say this, I don't mean that's it for Eddie Brock. I think we're going to see plenty more of Eddie. But it wraps up his time as the main focus or the main wielder of the symbiote. Mm-hmm. And it's a nice homage to his history while also charting a new course for the character of Venom. Like it balances, he walks that tightrope quite well, having to do both jobs of closing out the past, 35 issues and longer if you go back further, mm-hmm. and then also setting up the future of the character, and I like the
Yes.
way it did that. So it was very well done.
Yes. So before we get to our rating on this, I'd like to close out with, this is from, Eddie's Clubhouse, the mailbag at the end. Devin Lewis, the editor of this issue, had just a little something to say, and I thought it was really profound. He says, as a lifelong Venom maniac, this has truly been the honor of a lifetime to be able to helm this historic 200th issue. I was there as a fan over 30 years ago when he came to life, and now here we are, closing out the biggest issue to date. And I got to do it with some of my best friends in the world. Thank you. Thank you all so much. We're stronger when we're together. And we, all of us, we are Venom. Love it. Yeah, well said.
Well put. I like it. Awesome. So with that, Donnie, and you being the Venom expert on this podcast network, what would be your rating? So remember, 5 for art and 5 for story.
I'm going to give it a perfect 5 in both counts. I just thought it was a wonderful experience, and like I said, there's so much flavor here from the different Venom eras, and there was humor. There was a lot of heartfelt moments. There's some good action too. Yeah, this is one of the key essential Venom books that you're going to want if you are a Venom fan or you are becoming a Venom fan.
Yeah, and again, I know it's the 200th issue and the last issue of this run, but I think it's a great jumping on point. I think it works well in that respect, and I loved it as a fan, but not one that's been reading for terribly long in terms of this character. I loved it, and it certainly made me invested in reading more and sticking with the character in his future, in his future new book, which is coming in November.
Right, and obviously we're going to see Dylan as Venom, which I think is very intriguing. So
it's kind of cool in the sense that
we'll call him Denim.
yeah.
You know what they say? It's not the denim; it's what you put in them.
Yeah, no, but but it's kind of cool that this was the first issue where he truly bonded with the symbiote, and now I'm gonna get to it. So, in a way, I've been reading this newer Venom kind of from day one.
There you go.
So it's kind of cool that way.
Hey, sure.
It's kind of like with John Kent, now gearing up to become Superman.
Oh, yeah, good parallel.
I've been reading John Kent since he was first introduced, and now I get to continue reading him as he transitions into Superman. I think that's freaking great. So I'm getting the same thing here, and I'm kind of looking forward to that. I can't wait. So, but yeah, for me, it's a 5 for story and a 5 for art. What a great issue!
Yes.
And a great way to really kick our
$9.99 for Marvel Comics. Lots of variant covers if you're into collecting.
Yeah, and it's like it's about 80 some odd pages, right?
Yes, 80 page. Yeah, I believe it's 80 pages actually. Yeah.
Yeah. So, this is a great way to really start our kickoff of reviewing Venom more frequently. So, good start, and can't wait to do more.
Sure.
But that brings this episode to a close. But you can continue the conversation with us. So if you want to talk to us about your excitement for the new ongoing Venom book or the upcoming changes to the Spider-Man the status quo, you can on social media. So Donnie, where do they find you?
You can find me on Twitter as the Emerald Enthusiast, blah, blah, blah. Well, let's talk comics. Let's talk collectibles. Let's talk Green Lantern. Let's talk Venom.
We could sort of rename you the Vemerald Enthusiast.
I like it. Yes.
Anyway, But if you want to find me, it's at Adam_LeafsFan on Twitter. The podcast network has its own Twitter handle, which is at MMNPDC. There's a Facebook page, which is linked in the description below. Click there, I'll add you, and we can continue the conversation there. But remember that, in closing, we are Venom forever, from the first issue to the last. So long, everybody.
Don't forget to subscribe.